Hi everyone and welcome back. Today let's talk about the business of criticism a little more closely. We'll review a little bit, and I want to present to you here early on in our class a perspective of method that I think you'll find very helpful, and if you go a little deeper into this world, should serve you well. Okay, I've kind of redone my subtitle here, inspiration or manipulation. That's what we're kind of looking at in our critical view of rhetoric throughout the world. And saw an interesting film last night. It's called Laundromat. It's on Netflix at this point, and Meryl Streep is the lead actress, and she plays, oh, I can't give it away here, but it was a highly rhetorical film about campaign finance reform, actually, is what it comes to in the end. I can give away that much. It tells a story, kind of documentary style. I think it's a true story. From everything I could tell from the film, it was just last night, I haven't looked up the film yet on IMDb or read what critics have said about it, but it looks like it's about true events and a true story. Well done, well acted, well written, and a moving film in some sense, and I hope it has its rhetorical effect that's intended. I think that might be good for the world. So, is that inspiring? Or did the film manipulate me in some way to think that? Well, that's the question we really try to answer in rhetorical criticism, and we praise the inspiration. We can cast blame upon the manipulation, and hopefully encourage people who are doing rhetoric but not doing it ethically or well to move back over toward inspiring us to be our best selves and that sort of thing. All right. I want to start with the idea of a close reading here. Let's start with reviewing. What is a text? What is an artifact? Rhetorical critics critique something. It doesn't mean criticize. It means you're taking a close look at it and you are figuring out what's going on, and then we tell people about it. We do evaluate, and you can pass judgment towards the end of your essay. You won't want to, at the beginning of something, if you're writing you listen to the university president's speech about raising tuition, and you're a journalist for the school newspaper, and you want to say something about that speech, you're becoming a rhetorical critic. And you don't want to spill the beans at the beginning with your casting your judgment in the first sentence. We hold that back until the end. But let's review this question here. What is a text? What is an artifact? And I want you to notice, first of all, on the slide, I have an orator here in the corner, former President Obama, giving a speech, and I think I want to steer your attention away from critiquing formal political speeches or other speeches. And I do that to try to bring in some balance, because rhetorical criticism has traditionally looked at speeches. It's all about speeches, political speeches, typically speeches that move us to action, speeches that change the world, a series of speeches, a speaker who changes the world. And I want you to recognize that with the rise of mass media, both hands here going on, there are far more ways that people try to influence the society than just simply giving a speech anymore. Yes, you may critique speeches in this class. I'm just fine with that. But please don't ignore all the other forms of media that have highly active persuaders on the writing and production teams, and even paying the bill for these productions. And so I show you films, music, Occupy Wall Street, public protests, books, the Communist Manifesto, photographs that help social movements. Here we got a baby seal about to meet its end, or an adult seal. And then the self-immolation, a guy setting himself on fire to make a point. Wow, how do you have any higher credibility than that with your audience if you're willing to kill yourself for the cause? The Twin Towers you know, somebody was trying to make a rhetorical statement there. Set all the emotion aside, look at it from a scholar's perspective, without whatever you may feel when you see a photograph like that. And you realize, yeah, it was an attack, but at the same time, it was a statement. And need to understand what that statement was. And it takes people who can do rhetorical criticism well to bring that out. Yes, then there are speeches here, but that's not all there is anymore. And I don't want this class to be about speech criticism. I want it to be rhetorical criticism. And we find rhetoric everywhere. All right, there's been a problem of method within rhetorical criticism. And I got the right slide up here, yeah. In the past, we've always looked at speeches, and typically we kind of take the primary #1 manual on speeches, Aristotle on rhetoric, and look at the speech and kind of use Aristotle in reverse here in a sense. And, you know, there's some good things to see in a speech that way. I don't want to throw out that method of doing things, but Edwin Black wrote a little book called A Study in Method. I have a copy of it at home. Edwin Black was the dissertation advisor for John Angus Campbell, who was my dissertation advisor. So I guess in a sense he's my intellectual grandfather. And in this book, Black just kind of destroyed all the kinds of speech criticism that had been going on up to that day and said, look, you're missing the point here. You're missing important things in criticism when you use these Aristotelian speech production methods to try to help you look at the speech and understand what's going on. Aristotle wrote to help people produce speeches. He didn't write to help us to understand them and tear them apart and evaluate them. In the past, there's been a number of forms of rhetorical criticism. I think you saw on the previous slide the words close reading up there. We'll get to that. But there's an Aristotelian criticism where you kind of use Aristotle in reverse to tear down a speech or to look at it. Fantasy theme analysis was something I was taught as a student, and I noticed in the one of the primary textbooks on rhetorical criticism today, they've cut that chapter out. Dramatic criticism, I've always kind of liked that one, and it's still in the book. We'll learn about that. Metaphor criticism is still in that book. We'll take a look at it because it's important, but it's not the strict direction we want to go. We'll look at idiographic criticism. There's 5 or 6 other methods here. And literally the method is here's the template, kind of like you see in the picture here. We have an elocutionary look at speech, and we have the pictures from the book from the 1780s, 1770s, showing how to do things in speech. And here you have an orator, photographs taken from probably 100 years later, and they are still doing things precisely that way. And so you take the method, and then you look at the speech and say, yes, he's doing it the right way. We've got something here. And it's kind of like this next slide here. Your caution, trees obscuring the view of the forest. You can't see the forest for the trees here. And if you use a method to help you with your criticism, to base your criticism on, it focuses you right in on very specific things, and that's good. But you could miss something very important that's off to the side of your narrow focus, because it's over here and it is the primary action of what's going on. And so to solve this problem, we want to look at rhetoric in a way that kind of comes in with the bigger view in mind and does a sweep and pulls everything in and narrows it down to what, here's what's really going on in this piece of rhetoric, and here is what needs to be talked about. Here is the evidence for looking at what is happening. I hope this is making sense. This is a key idea. You don't want to miss anything. Narrow methods cause you to miss things. And that's why Ed Black really just said, can't do it that way anymore. And it really caused, over the next 2 decades, kind of a revolution in rhetorical criticism in our discipline. Now, close reading is a method that, if you want to call it a method, I think it's broader than that. We have a picture here of Mike Leff. And Mike Leff was professor of rhetoric at Northwestern University for a couple of decades, worked at some other places. I met him in 1998 and again went to a 3-week seminar with him teaching rhetorical criticism at Northwestern University in 1999, and really got my brain stretched. And he brought in about 6 or 7 guest teachers that taught us all sorts of perspectives on method. But Mike's method, and I've kind of written it out here for you, is he says, you look at this text, remember all the pictures, the film, music, whatever, and you ask this text some questions, because the answers are buried in there. It is in there. If it was well performed by the people doing the rhetoric, the answers are there. And you ask the text, what does it tell you first about the producer, the people that created it? How do they think? What is the mind of the rhetor? A rhetor is somebody who does rhetoric. A critic is somebody that critiques rhetoric. So what does this text, the finished product, what does it tell you about the mind of the rhetor? Because they have ideas, they have pre-existing beliefs. If you want to go grab those classic psychology terms, the attitudes, the beliefs, and the values of the rhetor, the text will tell you what they are. What's the attitude here? What's the belief system? What's the value system of this person? It gets embedded in this text in subtle ways. And you, by using the close reading techniques, literally, for me, reading something over and over and over, bringing different ideas into mind, different lenses, looking, what do I see here? How are they using rhetorical figuration? What's the argument going on? Rereading it again, backing off, grabbing ideas from Michael McGee on ideographs. Do I have any of this happening? The metaphors, coming back at it. Close reading, or repetitive reading even, you could call it, but you're getting in close, getting your hands dirty in the text. And I was taught a similar method in discourse analysis in grad school. I remember Richard Butney, pretty well known for his work there, and he said he'll get in, he'll read a text 50 times, and it starts opening up and giving you its secrets. And that's the idea here of a close reading. And it'll tell you secrets about what these people, the producer, the speaker, the rhetor, the writer, what they were thinking when they produced it. It also tells you, number 2 here, what the rhetor thinks the collective mind of the audience is. It tells you what arguments were used. Obviously this was effective. You probably wouldn't be studying if it didn't make any difference in the world. But what does it tell you about what the person that produced it thought his audience were, or who he thought they were, or what he thought their attitudes, beliefs, and values are all about? It gets embedded in there, the kind of arguments they use. And I'll take an aside here. Lately, I've been noticing a lot of public discourse about politics just ridicules or abuses people that are holding the opposite position. It can be done with memes, bumper stickers, jokes, all sorts of really quick, compact, tight. Look at this, you look at the picture, by the time you've read the sentence, they've hit you with their argument that this particular politician is an absolute idiot, and you are an idiot if you vote for them. And it's an abusive, it's a bullying way of trying to persuade somebody. So what does this tell you about the mind of the person that produced it? Well, they think bullying is okay. They think they are right, that they're absolutely right, that you are absolutely wrong, and that it's okay to tease you, to make fun of you, to ridicule you, to get their message across. It also tells you that they believe you're probably not very smart. It starts really opening up there. You're stupid for supporting that cause. You don't understand the facts. You don't have the big picture view of something. And finally, we get to number 3 here, the preferred relationship from the writer's perspective of the relationship between you, the audience, and the person that produced it. So the person that produced that little bumper sticker I told you about, if you don't like to stand behind our military, maybe you'd like to stand in front of them with the gun is pointed right at you. And what does that tell you about the preferred relationship? Well, they're basically saying, if you don't stand with me and believe what I believe, I'm fine with them shooting you. It's a lot of disrespect here in that relationship. Any of these other memes and jokes and bumper stickers that use these tactics are showing a lot of disrespect. It becomes uncivil at a certain point. Not just light teasing anymore. Not just, here, think about this. I'm making an argument, you ought to think about it. And that's how a lot of these bumper stickers and things used to be. And now they've just turned into really memes of disrespect, that sort of thing that, I don't care what you think about me even. I'm going to call you a name, and I'm going to try to bully you into maybe just into irrelevance. And then you have to ask, who's the actual audience? Was it the person that doesn't support the military? Or was it people who haven't really decided about it yet? And that's a fair question for you to ask too. Remember the rhetorical situation. You have an exigence, and you have an audience, and you have the rhetoric needs to be produced to address this. And so who really is that audience? And there are often multiple audiences to look at. And you can look in a good analysis at the multiple audiences that this work may be aimed at. And that comprises a whole section in an essay that you write. Okay, let's back off. What does the text tell you about? The mind of the person that produced it, the collective mind of the intended audience, and what is the preferred relationship between you and the audience? Are they the expert and they want to teach you? Are they just a bully and you are to be disrespected and bullied? What kind of relationship are we building here? Is there one of respect where I want you to think about these ideas and let's open up a conversation about it and start looking at some of the facts that we have, start looking at some historical perspective, which is the way, obviously we want to go there. Am I dictating to you this is what you need to believe? Or am I inviting you, here, consider this position on gun control? And maybe you haven't thought it all the way through, and I'd like you to look at what we believe and what we're teaching and consider it. And I invite you to join us. Much more of a position of respect. So the rhetorical analysis tries to answer these 3 questions. And this close reading approach to it can be used with any of the smaller, more focused methods that can cause us problems. I kind of like to just look at a text and dive in, take it for what it is, start studying about it. Who is this audience? What was the context going on? Let's read history a little bit about what people were thinking in the early 1970s when Vietnam was dragging on and the body count was rising. And I remember 10 years old, I would have been 69, looking at every night in the news, well, we lost 21 soldiers today and we had 37 wounded. Literally the body count on our side and the enemy's side in the news, Walter Cronkite, every night. And what else was going on in that period? If I want to understand Vietnam War rhetoric, I need to get into the history books and learn something about it. That helps me understand who those audiences were and what that preferred relationship might have been between the producers of various movies or even documentaries. All right, let's just some reminders here as we go on. Rhetorical criticism, set your biases to the side. You have them, flag them, identify them, and do your best to set them off to the side. And probably in the editing process, you may find a couple that slipped into your work, and you try to tone those down at the least. You may be saying something important that needs to be said, but here's where you have the chance to tone it down. You don't ridicule, you don't abuse, and what we're really looking at is that sophism versus ethical rhetoric, the inspiration of ethical rhetoric compared to the manipulation of the sophist. And that's where we ultimately go with our evaluation. It gets complicated from there, but you'll understand the complications when you dive into the artifact you want to look at. All right, since this is our class where you're learning how to write in this university, and I hope you know the basics of writing already. If not, I'm patient and we'll learn what we can, and I've provided some material on that. But let's review some of that and just really try to, grasping writing principles is pretty basic, and repetition helps us to do that. So first of all, in writing something like a rhetorical analysis, think of it as storytelling. Storytelling is probably the best paradigm to bring to your keyboard where you start to write, or if you still write longhand and then type it up later. Whatever helps your thinking mechanism work, do it that way. No right or wrong here. Storytelling. Rhetorical criticism does well with this. And some years ago, I was curious about how writers in rhetorical criticism opened up their articles. So I grabbed a handful of journals from the Quarterly Journal of Speech, and I looked at the opening lines of every article in those journals. And I found that 75% of the writers started the article with a point in time. Does that make sense? You know, that reminds me of something. That's like a lot of classic books. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, from Charles Dickens. Go back farther. Once upon a time, there lived. Yeah, that's a good way to start any kind of piece of work, is find a date or an epoch or a period in time a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away. Another classic story, right? And set your essay in time as well. On August 12th, 1959, a person was born. Well, that's maybe a little early in their career. How about, on September 20th, 2006, an event happened that caused our president to stand in front of the TV cameras and address the nation. Now we're getting somewhere. That's probably the kind of opening for an essay that you'll want to use. A film was released in 2004 that just shook up the world and caused them to start questioning reality. And as the years have passed, that film has proved prophetic. I'm thinking of The Matrix, actually. Start your essays that way, at a point in time. But you're telling a story then, and now you can tell what happened on that day. It was something significant happened that points us to the rhetorical artifact you're looking at. And then as you dive into looking at the artifact, a story starts to unfold. What was the problem? What was going on? What was the event that brought the rhetorical exigence to us, that somebody's got to do something about this now? And then the filmmakers stepped up and produced a movie that gave us a perspective on the event, and that gave us a prescription for how to move forward into the future. And you explain what that is, and then you analyze the rhetoric. You analyze the, what's going on in time there. You analyze how they approached their audience, how they tried to persuade the audience. Who were they that produced it? Who did they think they were talking to? and what is that preferred relationship between them? And then the final outcome, did the world change? Is the rhetoric still in effect? Good rhetoric does not stop working until the problem is solved. Martin Luther King's speech, "I have a dream," will be powerful until we genuinely have racial equality in this world now, not just in the United States or in the South. It got better for a while. We started backing off again by the late 70s. Got better again, and it seems now in 2019 here, there's still problems. That speech is still powerful because of that. Once the problem is solved, the speech isn't needed anymore. It becomes just a historical footnote in a sense, and you can read it and you start wondering, wow, what was going on when this was preached by King? Okay, in an essay asks a question and it answers the question. It's that simple. No need to write an essay if you don't have a question about the topic. You know, if you sit down, what am I going to write about? Well, start with a question. That's what you start with. What are you wondering about? What's some problem you're curious about? That you think you have an answer to. I mean, otherwise, you've just got something to think about for another year or so until answers start to unfold. So in the introduction of an essay, you want to ask a question. And I think I've told you about this one. It's an introduction for an essay on interpersonal communication about not reading the signs when you should. And I use this one a lot in class that, you know, in the summer, or actually it was the late spring of 1977, in the weeks before I graduated from high school, it was yearbook time. And I had a yearbook and my friends were signing it, but there was one person who I was really looking forward to have signing my yearbook. It was my girlfriend. And so on that fateful day, I gave her my yearbook that morning to sign, and she says, "I don't have time now, I'll sign this later." And I waited all day long wondering what romantic thing is she going to write in here that gives hints about our future together and her willingness to take the next step perhaps after high school. And so I'm waiting on this, and I get my yearbook back, and she hands it to me at the end of the day and says, "I gotta go," and she takes off. And so I start flipping through the pages, and there, on that fateful page, which I still have to this day, was a Dear John letter in my yearbook. How did that happen? There's my question, or the start of it. Did I miss something? Well, yeah, I did miss some signals. How do you not see this coming when somebody's about to break up with you and you think everything is just wonderful? Well, there's my question right there. That's I'm really getting to the end of the introduction here. And the next part, you answer the question. And that's what a thesis statement does. And so I can say, well, yes, I did miss something. In fact, and here's a statement of fact. When people want to break up with you, they send you nonverbal signals first to let you know. If you don't get the hint, they'll finally say it out loud. We usually don't get the hint, but I had no clue. The thesis part of it goes on. Now that's a pure thesis. It's just a statement of fact. Here's a statement of truth. What your essay needs next is the critical part. Let's just call it, I call it a thesis statement. Let's call it a purpose statement. Why does this essay exist? You've asked me a question. You've given me a short answer to it, but I kind of want to know more about that answer. What are these signals that you're talking about? How do I recognize them? Well, we're getting to this part now. What you write is, in what follows, I will explain the different ways that people communicate their desire to end a relationship non-verbally prior to ever saying anything about it. In what follows, I will explain. There's the key part. This essay is going to do something. And so I use an action verb, explain. I can discuss it, I can explain it, I can elaborate, I can enumerate. Take your choice of verbs here. Depends on what your essay's doing. We're going to dive into this, but use an action verb. Readers need action in the writing, or the writing is just flat and dull. Always use as many action verbs as possible. And so you tell your reader what the essay will do. In what follows, I will explain or describe the various nonverbal signals that people typically use when they want to end a relationship. I've promised an answer to the question. What those are, I've used an action verb, and then you can preview the rest of the essay if you like. There are meta messages people use. People increase their distance from you physically, and people also become more vague with things they talk to you about. We could probably find 10 different ways. We'll pick those 3. So you can preview the rest of your essay then. The important part here is you're asking a question, and it's a question your reader is likely to want to know what's going on, and that's your job in the introduction. We'll talk more about it later. You promise the answer to that question. Your thesis statement and that purpose statement promise the answer, and they tell you what it is and how you're going to deliver it. Okay, that's your writing lesson for the day, and take it to heart. It works. And if you use especially that form, in what follows, I will describe, explain, experiment, study, you'll get an A on everything else you write in college. And if this is your final semester, I wish somebody would have taught you that when you were a freshman. I think they just don't quite have the full picture over there in the English departments, or they're good professors that do aren't the ones teaching English 101. That's probably closer to the real matter. All right. Have a great day, and we will talk to you in our next lecture.